All right, so we're moving into chapter 8 of Rhoda's book, and we're going to talk about the multiverse. Okay, so how does this go? Well, first, Rhoda's going to put aside two objections. So he's been noting that this fine tuning evidence that the universe is fine tuned for life is accepted by a lot of scientists and physicists. Okay, that said, you don't find all these scientists becoming religious believers or theists, right? So what's up with that? Well, Rhoda needs to give an explanation, and this is on the handout. You should have got right now. Of course, pause and get it if you don't have it. Taking on chapter 8. So Rhoda gives two replies to the question why scientists aren't concerned about this. um, the first is that he takes scientists to be concerned primarily with physical reality. So like in science we study the natural universe, right? The natural world. And God would just be outside of that. So you might take scientists to be exploring the fine-tuning evidence, but then when the idea of God comes up, they'll just be like, hey, that's outside our area. That's not for us. That's the main point Rhoda makes. He adds the point that he might say there's social pressures um, to not like invoke God or a supernatural being, and partly is he has that nice quote from Leonard Susskind at the bottom of page 126. I thoroughly believe that real science requires explanations that do not involve supernatural agents. Okay, so and I mean that sort of view is it's understandable. I mean, back in the day, he uses the example where it's thundering, and you're like, oh, the rain gods are angry right now, and gradually we've been putting those aside, right? Even as recent as I think Descartes, or even, but to explain some of the planetary motions, they thought, okay, that's where the angels are starting to push the planets, right? I forgot which famous person said this, but so yeah, so a lot of scientists just are gonna keep God out of the picture, insofar as they're doing science. Okay, that said, so that's the quick question. Scientists are concerned with physical reality and not with supernatural explanations. Okay, now the next question on the handout, how does Rhoda respond to the objection that we shouldn't invoke God to explain something if it isn't scientific? And this is where Rhoda's just going to say, well, so much the worse for science and so much the better for philosophy. Okay, so if science is such that just a priori default, you're not allowed appealing to God or anything supernatural, um, then that's just ruling something out that could be a possible good explanation of fine tuning. As philosophers, we're open minded to physical explanations of things, but also theistic explanations of things, and even other, we could point to any other religious explanations or whatever. Um, so that's the cool thing about philosophy, okay, which is we're not kind of constrained. Like, as philosophers, we should be considering any sort of view. We've been, well, yeah, so uh, Rhoda on page 127 gives this example where, let's say, to Leonard Susskind, um, like in the sky, there were these the stars. Did he use stars? Um, let's just say there were stars that rearranged in such a way that said, "I most certainly exist, Leonard," and we can add sign God or something. Um, I mean, that will certainly be evidence that there's a God. Even if we stick only to science, you're not allowed using the supernatural. But just ruling it out by default is not something philosophers do. Maybe at the end of the day, with philosophical reasoning, we'll conclude that there is no God. But as philosophers, we're not going to restrict our evidence. We should be just looking for what's any good valid argument, what's any good sound argument, what's any good argument that's supported by the evidence. All right, so next we'll be digging into the multiverse.